when we talk about the colonial policies, I'll give you a hard copy like this. It's basically identifying what I'm going to be covering with you. Now, again, you see, this is a major code of silence that impacts on your status and what's affecting you right now as Métis, as Indians, and status Indians. So when we look at that process, then you know what the doctrine of discovery of the empires of England, Spain, France, and Portugal. They divvied up the world for exploration. The Empire of England had North America, Australia, New Zealand, and parts of India. Portugal and France had Africa. Spain had South Central America. And they sent out explorers to lay claim to our lands and resources. They didn't lay claim, they stole the lands and resources from our indigenous peoples and our nations worldwide. And they knew it. So they had to do something to validate what they did in terms of criminal activity in more ways than one. But the lands and the resources, they wanted some validation for the theft of the lands and resources from our nations and our people. So what did they do? They went to the Pope of the Catholic Church. And the Pope of the Catholic Church developed and implemented what's known as the Papal Bull of 1493. Now keep that in mind. 1493. What does the Papal Bull say? The Papal Bull says Indigenous people are not human or Christian. Because Indigenous people are not human, they don't have sovereignty and government. Because Indigenous people are not human, they don't have title to lands and resources. Because Indigenous people are not human, they do not have rights. That's 1493. Here we are in 2020, and we're still dealing with the same issues. And the people you represent are certainly affected by the Papal Bull instructions. How did they implement them? They implemented using Christian law. It was reinforced by and implemented by the churches, not just the Catholic Church, but all the churches. And of course, the governments of the empires worldwide, impacting our indigenous peoples, our lands and resources, and so on. Now, when we look at that process then of the impact of those types of laws and policies issued by the church, by the Catholic Church, they were implemented under Christian laws. And there's another law that is part of the Code of Silence I talk about. Many people know nothing about it. It's a law called the Law of Dominance. What is the Law of Dominance? It's a law that makes it legal to kill indigenous peoples. That's why you saw the slaughter of millions of indigenous peoples worldwide. When you look at the other groups of people that have been killed, nothing comes close to the number of people that were slaughtered who were indigenous peoples by those explorers. And England even had so many pounds per scalp for Indian scalps. Now that's, again, you see, a code of law that was issued by the Catholic Church and implemented under Christian law. Another form of code of silence. So when we look at the doctrine of discovery, the 1493 Papal Bull, people say that the doctrine of discovery and Papal Bull terminated in the 17th century. Well, like hell it did. They replaced that and implemented what they call the 1830 deteriorization policies of the empires of England, Spain, France, and Portugal. What are those? Well, you'll recognize them by the objectives. The objectives was civilization, Christianization, integration, assimilation, and liquidation or termination. Now, isn't that what we're dealing with today? I'm talking about 1830 now. And that's the issues that we're dealing with today, are they not? And those are the issues that impact directly on the people that you're representing, that fall between the cracks in terms of no status, no rights, and no benefits. So you can go on then to look at those objectives and how they implemented them. They targeted who and what? They targeted, first of all, the termination of the sovereignty of our nations and the governments of our nations, and they outlawed them under their laws and policies. And then they targeted individuals, families, extended families, societies, and of our nations. Now, when we look at how they done that, the residential school is only one method. They actually constructed laws outlawing our language, our culture, our traditions, our customs, our lodges, our ceremonies, you name it. They had laws in place that terminated everything, including the recognition of our government jurisdiction laws. And when we look at that process then and examine the impact, what is the impact? Well, we ended up losing total control of everything, total control of our political developments and our governments, total control of our economy that provided for livelihood and benefits, total control. We lost total control of our citizenship and membership. That's why you're struggling like you are today. We lost total control of our lands and resources, our justice system, our economy. And when we look at the citizenship and membership, like I said, we lost total control of that. Now we lost total control of every sector. And you can see the list that we have in the graphs and documents we have to provide for you. But when a society of people loses that degree of control, what happens? Well, you're looking at it. It creates symptoms, major symptoms, as a result of loss of total control in the form of dysfunctional families and communities, addictions of alcohol, drugs, so on, gangs. There's dysfunctional governments today. And again, your people fall in the cracks of those dysfunctional functions of government in terms of the laws. And when we look at that whole process, we're even denying ourselves the recognition of our own justice system, our own jurisdiction, and our own inherent legal system. It provides for major suicides that you're looking at now, poor health conditions, and we lost our social safety net of how we taught and dealt with the teachings of our people from birth to death and the various stages of birth to death. That could go on and on for about 3.5 pages of symptoms that you'll get copies of to look at and examine on how they impact on your people. So when we move ahead then in terms of the issue of the colonial policies and examine that, you'll hear about the systemic racism. Well, that's the source of systemic racism. It exists in every department and the laws of government, including justice and the justice system. Now, people are saying there's no racism, there's no systemic racism. Well, you now know where it comes from. And people are asking, how did this happen? Well, I've given you the information on what they've done to make it happen. So we need to organize ourselves to terminate all those policies. So what did Canada do to implement the doctrine of discovery, the papal bull, and the 1830 detribalization policies with the objectives of civilization, Christianization, assimilation, integration, and liquidation? Canada passed the 1947 plan to liquidate Canada's Indian problems in 25 years, to terminate all those treaties and treaty rights that I showed you in the video on treaties, terminate all our inherent rights, our inherent sovereignty, inherent title to lands and resources that I showed you on the video for inherent rights. So when we look at examining the impact that's there under the 1947 plan to liquidate Canada's Indian problems, within 25 years. It included terminating those treaties I showed you. And that's treaties 1 to 11 and other treaties. Not the modern day treaties, but the ones that they made historically. So then, along with that came the strategy how to do with it, to terminate the special rights and status of Indians. And they were more specific in that in 1969, and I'll cover that. But they also initiated the transfer of responsibilities of the federal government for Indian health, Indian education, Indian social development, and child welfare, you name it, to transfer those to the provincial governments and terminate the federal government's legal, fiscal, jurisdictional responsibilities under the treaties and under the Constitution. Now, again, many of your people fall under that area of policies that are eliminating them from their status and their rights and benefits. So then came the 69 White Paper, first generation devolution policies to step up the process of transferring responsibility for Indians from federal jurisdiction to provincial jurisdiction. That's what's happening today. But they had a specific strategy on how to terminate the special rights and status of Indians by amending existing law or constructing new law. Bill C-31 now terminates whole families, not just one Indian at a time. And some of the people that you're representing are affected by 6-1, 6-2, 6-3, 6-4, 6-5, 6-6 status. And after 6-2, there's no benefits or no rights recognized. They're recognized as Indian. But again, you see, you're talking about a law that's amending the Indian Act that violates the treaties, violates our inherent rights, and certainly violates Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982 that recognizes the citizenship status of Indians, Métis, and Inuit. So when you move ahead then with the strategies of the 69 White Paper, they then developed what you call the local governments on reserves, so like municipal governments. How? By setting up all these corporate entities under provincial corporate law. They're on reserves, they're by bands, they're by tribal councils, organizations like the Federation of Nations, the AFN, and so on. And again, you see, your people are affected by all that. Now, when we move on then to the policies, 74-76 Native policy that people don't know about, and that's how to hire Indians, Métis, and Inuit in the front lines of government to implement these policies. Then came the 1980 Buffalo Jump, Mulroney conservative Buffalo Jump termination policies, and implemented the second generation policies to implement the final touches on transferring responsibilities for Indians from the federal government to provincial government. So that highlights for you the 500 years of history that we've experienced